Oh, I'm sorry. Gosh, I've been off. I've been talking to myself all this time. No sound. Okay, I'm back. I've been on a rant, ladies and gentlemen. I've been on a rant. I'm glad the mic was off. I keep putting the mute on. You didn't miss anything. I'm just consider me starting 19 minutes late. We're getting into the heart of it right now. You're there? Yes. Okay. Horse sense. Thank you. Good, David Jimmy. Good point. NNS. Professor Christy Liebel, thank you very much. 19 minutes in. Okay, we're gonna. I was just talking about me being the Robin Williams of academia, or wannabe, and about the different pieces of work we're going to be investigating in the future. But let me continue with what I call the Alice effect. It's not what I call it, by the way. I had a lucid dream the other day saying, "Oh yeah, I think I have a handle on what Grace Kelly represents. I'm going to call it the Alice effect." Said, but you know what? I bet that's already been taken. And sure enough, I did my research, and there's a person who has articulated, and I'll get to him in a moment, this whole idea of the Alice effect. Now, his definition, and this is so new to me that I don't ever remember his name offhand, but it's a really good essay here. I'll get to it in a moment, but his definition of it is somewhat like mine, but mine goes deeper because my definition connects to the very heart of what I'm calling the New World Order. And I think Grace Kelly, the actress Grace Kelly, before that she was a model and a beauty queen and all that. I think she was an early experiment on what we're seeing now has become the norm amongst particularly film actors. And you know their names. And a lot of the stuff on YouTube, which I had a 20-minute rant on, that's why I'm glad the sound was off, because I mentioned a few names there that I probably will regret doing. Not because of any retaliation, but because I don't want to make any enemies if I don't have to, because we're all pretty much in the same boat here. But anyway, let me continue with this story here. Um, Let me just skip the first part because I already wasted 20 minutes here. Let me talk about this report of Grace Kelly as a priestess, I guess, or at least a member, maybe not a priestess, but a member of the solar temple. And that much has been verified. She was indeed a dues paying member of this order, which had origins supposedly in the Knights Templar. And the real Knights Templar, by the way, from what I've read, don't really appreciate having their name appropriated. And that's one of the explanations that are advanced to explain why Grace Kelly supposedly was murdered, not killed in an auto accident, as it was reported. But here is and that's why I'm going to read it here because it's so bizarre. Here is a description by someone who supposedly was there or had a very close proximity to the actual events, an accurate puncturist way. Anyway, here it is. First, the princess was taken to a derobing chamber where an acupuncturist, who to this day is still haunted by the princess's intense blue eyes, began to relax her by placing needles on meridians known to give sexual pleasure. Then Grace was given something to drink, perhaps a tranquilizer, at about 7 p.m., dressed in a white Templar robe with a red cross. She was escorted down an inner staircase to the crypt of the priory, where she lay down on a huge round altar marked with a mixture of Kabbalistic signs and pictures of the 12 apostles. As Wagnerian music rose in a crescendo, the higher entities were asked if they agreed that Grace should become high priestess of the order, to which they responded yes. The princess was taken back upstairs, and in the early hours of the morning was driven home in the jaguar that had brought her to the priory. There has been much, and I'll end in a moment here. There has been much written about Grace Kelly since her death in 1984. Beautiful, serene, and mysterious, she captivated the world for decades. A much anticipated exhibition at the Victoria and Albert Museum next month will focus attention on her role as a style icon, with pieces from her wardrobe displayed alongside her films and photographs. Yet apparently, beneath the glamorous facade of her fairy tale life lies a dark underbelly. Whispers of sexual promiscuity and even the suggestion that Kelly was not at the wheel when the car carrying her and teenage daughter Stephanie plunged off a rocky hillside continue to surface. None is more bizarre, though, than the claim that shortly before her untimely death, Kelly was initiated into a cult called the Order of the Solar Temple. The allegations centered on interviews with a man who worked for over a decade for DiMambro, that's Joseph DiMambro, a senior leader of the sect and an acupuncturist who claimed she helped prepare the princess for the initiation ceremony that is said to have taken place in the summer of 1982 in an ancient priory in Beaujolais. Okay, so that's I'll post this article later, and it's still online, by the way. I was kind of surprised it's there. I have a whole nother file folder on her that I gathered a few years ago. I can't even find it right now because I think I filled up 2 or 3 hard disks by that time. So I'm kind of revisiting this here, and some of this is going from memory. But I'm glad I'm revisiting thanks to your indulgence at this point, because I think it really helps to put a fine point on the, let's call it psychopathology. That's what Freud called it, or that's how it was translated. It puts a fine point on the psychopathology of our current ruling elite. We are starting to answer the great meta question, that is the above question of questions, which is why? Why? What are these people? Because it's beyond our ken, it's beyond our imagination that people are, if you can call them that, individuals, human beings, ostensibly human beings. Who knows what they really are? They could be entities, right? And I don't rule that out. These creatures, these entities, let's call them, how can they uh, be so callous and cold about decimating, wiping out large, not just individuals, but large populations in one fell swoop? That's the question that I'm trying to grapple with. And in order to do so, I have to venture, because I don't particularly enjoy reading this material myself. I'd much rather be learning new songs on my instrument and learning how to sing them and play them and studying them. And even there, it gets kind of weird. I was just as an aside, I was trying to learn "Strawberry Fields Forever." I think I've got it down, but I was learning the chords, the harmonic progressions, and I was reading the words, the lyrics. And this is a John Lennon song. It was always credited to Lennon-McCartney, but this is primarily a John Lennon song. And "Strawberry Fields Forever" is full of Twilight language. It's you might call it, I don't think he would describe it as neuro-linguistic programming, but there's some sort of deep programming that's taking place in that song, as in a lot of Beatles tunes. And I think that's one of the reasons why there's a contingent out there that likes to say the Beatles, you must not go there. They're satanic, they're demonic, they're the product of Tavistock. I think that part of that might be so, right? But does that mean that we cannot study it? We shouldn't study it? Does that mean that all the work that they produce is of that ilk? I don't necessarily subscribe to that view. It's an absolutist sort of perceptual Nazi type of criticism, which I reject out of hand. So I'm just giving you that as an aside. This is just something that I started to think gradually came to me over the past. It takes me a long time to remember progressions, but I usually can get it down within a few hours, right? I can memorize it. I don't read it. I internalize it. And by the way, the art of memory is very, very crucial in the Renaissance esoteric tradition and occultism. especially in societies where literacy is absent. So these maguses, these magicians, the musicians, the minstrels, the poets, right? That's why they have such powerful presence in societies and culture, because they have that memory. All this information, the knowledge and the wisdom has been ingrained in their brains, and it's in song. And I studied it, and I realized, oh, that's why I was drawn to wanting to understand Strawberry Fields Forever. I needed it in order to help me in this quest for understanding the meta question: what are these people up to? Anyway, just another. You've had uh, encounters like this yourself, no doubt. And I wish I hadn't burned 20 minutes up front, because I would like to engage you in the chat room about your experience. Well, we can do that on the office hours next Wednesday. We can talk about your, because that's more interesting to me. I know what I'm interested in your experiences with this type of phenomena, whether it's music, songs, or other let's call it trance like states of mind, altered states of consciousness, right? This is all part of this study that I'm embarked on. Okay, so you get a better idea of where Grace Kelly is. And one of the questions was, did I think that Alfred Hitchcock was responsible for her death? No, not directly. I will answer that. I don't have any information about that, but I will. It's a good question, because I'm sorry if I implied that he was involved, but I do know, I have at least two sources, maybe three sources. I do know Alfred Hitchcock to have been put in place as a director, great as he is, right? He's talented, no doubt. Was put in place to help shore up that special relationship between British intelligence and American intelligence, right? Just like the Canadians are kind of brought in to meld mind with America, right? That's, the people. I devoted 20 minutes talking about those individuals. So you don't know what I'm referring to, but you've heard me on rants before about Magnificent Polly and all these other synthetic critics who suck oxygen out of the room so that people like George Webb cannot thrive, right? That's why they're put there. So anyway, here's one book that establishes the Hitchcock connection to my argument. It's called Something Completely Different, subtitled British Television in American Culture. Not a lot of you know that a lot of what passes as American television is actually British television, like All in the Family. That was called, that was brought from Norman Lear from Britain. I never understood why Norman Lear, because I guess he was a front for somebody, had to go all the way to London and sit down with the BBC people to come up with a sitcom premise called All in the Family, or Sanford and Son was called Steptoe and Son. I said, those stories, I mean, the premise could come from anywhere. But now I understand it was part of the special relationship that was being propagandized in American television, which back then was the primary mass medium. And you know that that same process is taking place in so-called new media, right? Cambridge Analytica, anybody? Right? Do you see the historical continuity? Yes. That's why I'm bringing it up, because it is relevant to our current quest. So check this book out, University of Minnesota Press. It's an academic study, if that means anything to you. And then this is a book that I'm returning to that I talked about a month ago, maybe earlier. It's the Hollywood Raj, how Brits reigned in the golden age of the movies. True. So they've always had a hand on our perceptions here. And it's written by a British journalist himself. This is a reprint. Fortunately, it's here for our use. And then another one was an article. I couldn't find it now at the last moment here. I was researching almost all the way up to airtime today. But I found an article about the Hitchcock connection to American media, and why they were particularly interested in Grace Kelly. And they didn't use this phrase. I'll use it now again. It's the Alice effect, which I'll go into now. I had to burn up too much time. I'm so happy that you stuck with it or stuck with me. I guess maybe you're reading my lips. And I'll talk about Natalie Portman. I want your insights on Natalie Portman. I'm still stuck in the generation of Grace Kelly, right? That's my parents' generation, looking up at that generation. But before I go into Natalie Portman, and that was the let's see. No, was she in it? No, no, she was not in Alice in Wonderland. She was in well, I'll get to it in a moment. But before I forget, uh, how are these, and we're talking primarily about women. How are these women controlled? Well, I think I figured it out. They're controlled through sex. Is that any surprise? And you know how they're controlled? Through Playboys, not Playboy magazine, not Hugh Hefner, but Playboys, good old fashioned Playboys. Here's Doris Duke, who, and by the way, this book was written by a guy who used to play basketball, went on pickup games over at UC Irvine, Sean Levy, who has written a number of really good celebrity, popular culture type bios. This one's called The Last Playboy. And it's about a Dominican named Porfirio Rubirosa. And he courted any number of very wealthy American and French nobility and rich capitalists like Doris Duke. She's the heir to the Duke, Duke University, right? Tobacco Road. She's the heir to the huge tobacco fortune, right? And stars, of course. And I was looking for a certain type of angle of Rubirosa here. And I found it. He was an intelligence guy. He was involved with intelligence. He was a spy. But the title, Mickey Spillane, My Gun is Quick. Well, he wasn't referring to his revolver. All right. So that's him. So whenever you're scratching your head, you see a beautiful star or a woman of society, and she's running around with someone like Oleg Cassini. That's Grace Kelly. She was dating this guy named Oleg Cassini, and yeah, he was in Hollywood and he was a designer and all that, but it really didn't square. I mean, what's she doing with this guy? And maybe there's some contemporary examples of that, because, and I'm mentioning this, by the way, is because usually it's the Mata Hari type. It's the women that are blamed for people like Kanye West and other. But it works both ways. In fact, the other direction might be more prevalent, right? So there might be some examples that you in the chat room have identified there that are controlling prominent women. No, I don't think Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton qualify for that, but maybe Michelle Obama. Yeah, she might be, one of those people. Who knows? Anyway, check this out and look for the Playboy types, as being these handlers of powerful, especially as more and more women come into political and financial power in our post-feminist world, if you want to call it that. Okay, let me move on to the discussion of the Alice complex. Again, I'm not taking credit for it. I don't know how much of this was that I deleted inadvertently in the first 19 minutes, but it owes to, let's see here, a individual. I'm reading here. This is all new to me, so I don't have it committed to memory like a lot of the stuff I do. This is from a behavioral science textbook. It's by Edward J. Fine. He is at the Department of Neurology. Okay, this is serious medical science here. Department of Neurology, University of Buffalo, the State University of New York, Buffalo, USA. Here's the abstract. The Alice in Wonderland syndrome is a term applied to altered, bizarre perceptions of size and shapes of patient's body and illusions of changes in the forms, dimensions, and motions of objects that a patient with this syndrome encounters. These metamorphoses it's a new word to me, metamorphosias, arise during complex partial seizures, migraine headaches, infections, and intoxications. The illusions and hallucinations resemble the strange phenomena that Alice experienced in Lewis Carroll's Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. And at the risk of being redundant, because a lot of you know the real story behind so-called the nom de plume, uh, Lewis Carroll, and you know the story about it. But let me read it. Just it's faster. Charles Ludwig's Charles L. Dodgson, whose nom de plume was Lewis Carroll, experienced metamorphoses. He described them in the story that he wrote for Alice Liddell and her two sisters after she spun a tale about a long and strange dream that the fictional Alice had on a warm summer day. The author of this chapter suggests that Dodgson suffered from migraine headaches and used these experiences to weave an amusing tale for Alice Liddell. Okay, that's his argument. I think he's partially right. I don't think that Dodgson, from the accounts that I've read, and I find them more credible than this explanation in this article. But from what I read, that Alex Dodgson had an unhealthy interest in little girls, not little boys, but little girls, and it's been well documented. It's been known for years, by the way, even before internet. I knew about Charles Dodgson. He also happened to be either an Oxford or Cambridge Don. He was what we call a professor in the USA. And his specialty was mathematics and logic, right? And that's no coincidence there, because a lot of these puzzles and mysteries of the mind revolve around all the esoteric knowledge of complex higher mathematics, right? Going back to Pythagoras, or perhaps even further back to the Egyptian mystery schools. And they're all involved with exerting worldly power coming from God sources. And you have these intermediaries, this priesthood, including mathematicians. And today they're usually clustered around the pharmaceutical industry and medical science, right? They wear these lab coats. That's our priesthood. But people like Dodgson are initiated into the higher mathematics, and they're transmitted to his students and other people who will occupy his position there. Oftentimes, as part of this training and this initiation, are, as I mentioned before in previous talks, are sexual trauma. We talked about Freund, not Freud, but Freund, F-R-E-N-D last time. I keep forgetting her first name. Who talked about betrayal trauma in these initiatory, and she doesn't talk about initiatory rights, by the way. That's what I'm adding to the conversation. The initiatory rights of certain, well, first let's start at school, because I think on the Thursday trio, we're going to talk a little bit about fraternities. We're going to talk about initiations, occult or esoteric. Today, Andy DeBala kind of prime me for that. So I don't know if it's going to go in that direction, but hopefully we'll get to detail that. And some of you, or most of you, probably already know a lot of this material anyway. But it typically starts in school with fraternity sororities. And again, counterintuitively, I argue that sororities are more important than fraternities. I think you have to look first and foremost with female power, the female element in almost everything. Let me just say everything. That includes my discussion of Donald Trump. I said, it's not about Donald Trump. It's about Melania Knobs. Okay, so you understand where I'm coming from. And that's why women are most often attacked by all these different entities. I won't call them human beings or something. I just call them entities, right? With the birth control and abortion and the what is it called? Behavioral endocrinology, and the whole pharmacopoeia meant to suppress the female element, right? And that tale is also, part of it is embodied in the story of Alice Liddell, Alice in Wonderland. Let's see. Let me look at another one. This is in the medical literature, ladies and gentlemen. I think we're onto something here. This is by Patrick O'Toole and Edward Justin Mondestino. They're again, neuroscience is co-opting a lot of this mystical, esoteric knowledge, by the way. Remember neurology, it's the decade of the brain. Didn't Barama sign an executive order, or was it Bush said this is going to be the decade of the brain? And sure enough, all of a sudden I started seeing students walking around campus with these giant $150 textbooks all about brain science and neurological science. So they're with both these guys are with the Department of Neurology, Boston University School of Medicine, Boston, By the way, that's where Isaac Asimov had a academic appointment. Many of you don't know that the great science fiction writer Isaac Asimov was a professor of it wasn't neurological science. I forgot what his area was, but it was somewhere in the sciences. So here's the title of the essay, Alice in Wonderland Syndrome, a real-life version of Lewis Carroll's novel. So it talks about John Todd, 1955, his essay that he wrote about these hallucinatory experiences. And this is what I'm getting so far, ladies and gentlemen, not a definitive take, but my initial take on coming across these articles, especially when they're coming out of journals of neuroscience, neurological studies, is that they are trying to incorporate a very real empirical phenomenon called hallucinations. They're trying to ascribe it to migraines, and perhaps there's a connection between epilepsy, because as we all know, epilepsy from ancient times, pre-biblical times, and prior to that, epilepsy was seen by the shaman or the priesthood of Egypt and Sumeria and all that, and other other civilizations. Epilepsy was seen as a divine possession. You were channeling God, or you were being possessed by these supernatural forces. So they're trying to medicalize something that is part of our human endowment, and therefore co-opt it. I'll use the example of sucking oxygen. They're trying to suck the oxygen out of a phenomenon. Let's call it the Alice complex. They're trying to suck the oxygen out of there so that you and I will no longer have a say-so in what it's really about. And what is it really about? I think you probably are ahead of me in this one. You know what it's about. It's about power and control over humanity, over our mind, power over our mind, our humanity, our beliefs, and our behavior. And here's one individual that they could not really subdue. They were trying so hard to capture and bottle and put a stopper on his creativity. And eventually it became too much for him and he had to take his own life. Guess how he died, ladies and gentlemen? Robin Williams, at age 63. Asphyxia. Yes, asphyxia, self-asphyxiation, Robin Williams. Oh, I'm going to have a really interesting challenge in trying to unpack Robin, which no one has really done at this point. Anyway, so let's talk. Let's move into Natalie Portman. And this is a couple years ago. I read a reference somewhere, and this is where the YouTube heroes come in handy. They look at these movies and talk about how this and this is a cult, blah, blah, blah. So I think I might have read it or seen it in one of those sites. But there was mention of a film, the first film that Natalie Portman starred in. And by the way, she was recruited into it. I didn't realize this, but she was recruited, interviewed, auditioned, I think the term is. What a great term, audition. She was auditioned at age 11 for a movie that in the US is called Leon, but in overseas it's called Leon the Professional. And her co-star is Jean Reno, Reno. And she starred in this film when she was 13 years old, right? That is the Lolita age, by the way. This is the Humbert age. It's usually 12, 13 years old. This is the age that Vladimir Nabokov, who probably himself was a victim of betrayal trauma, right? I mentioned him before in other contexts. He was warning us that this in the 1950s, he was warning us that this is how the elite of which he was part, by the way, he was part of this French-speaking Russian. I don't know if he's white Russian, but he was a French-speaking cosmopolitan Russians that were thrown out by the Bolsheviks, right? And he went to England for a few years and came to the U.S. He wrote in Russian and then in English, but he was sending us these messages in the ball. One of them was Lolita, and Lolita, the character, was 12 years old, 13. The premise was Humbert marrying Lolita's mother, who was either divorcee or a widow. Can't remember which. Point is that he married Lolita's mother so that he can be closer to Lolita. So this follows the Lolita model, the Lolita formula, the Natalie Portman story in this film, Leon. And I did my due diligence. I rented the film, I watched it, and man, was I creeped out. I said, man, when is the pedophilia going to start? I mean, it's so suggestive. And just for reference, I don't know how old Jean Reno was there, but I think he was probably in his 40s or something. And this is a 13-year-old girl that they had a very intense emotional relationship in this one film. And I don't think it was about Renault being the hitman on the run or about this girl that was abandoned. I think the subtext was Lolita. I think the subtext was the Alice Liddell, the Alice complex, as I'm referring to it there. I think that was the real subtext, just as the true subtext of Alice Wonderland, the film version of it, as well as the literary precedent, was about this Alice complex, this intergenerational pedophilic preoccupation amongst the elite, the initiates, the people who've been brought into the higher mathematics, who brought into the higher ranks of the military, of the corporate elite, of government, yes, of the university, because I myself found myself at any number of social functions wondering, what am I doing here? Why did they invite me? And if you have ever that feeling when you're at a corporate retreat or a management training program, then you know that your gut instinct is telling you that you don't belong there. There's some kind of Alice effect that's being put on you right then and there. So make your exit at that point. Do it as delicately or indelicately as possible, but you must not say yes to it. Because look what happened to Natalie Portman. She talks about this in an article. I don't know where it was published, but I have a copy of it here. The headline is Natalie Portman opens up about experiencing quote unquote sexual terrorism after starring in Leon at age 13. Very quickly, Natalie Portman has spoken out about being sexualized early in her career, saying that she experienced sexual terrorism at age 13. Portman was speaking at the Los Angeles leg of the Women's March 2018, where she opened up about her experiences after appearing in her first film, Leon the Professional, in 1994. During her speech, Portman revealed how her fan mail involved a quote-unquote rape fantasy written by a man that a local radio station launched to a countdown when she was legal to sleep with, quote-unquote, and how her critics, it's just really unseemly type of material. As a 13-year-old or as an 11-year-old, because that's when she was first approached to appear in this film, I don't think she had an awareness of what's going on. And that's where parental authority and guidance, which, by the way, is being subverted as we speak, right? Isn't the whole past 10-year agenda actually goes back to the Clinton administration, where Hillary talked about it takes a village to raise a children. No, it takes your parents to raise children. It doesn't take no village, especially if it's a village of pedophiles or people who like to form foundations and go to foreign countries like Haiti and bring back little children for their own perverse interests, right? So where were her parents, Natalie Portman? And we see time and time again, and I'm not casting aspersions on their parents. Maybe they were super naive, like a lot of adults were. Maybe they go, "Oh, yeah, my kid's going to be in a beauty contest," or yeah, they're going to they're going to be the most talented little toddler. They have these contests, right? You saw the movie. It was more benign and more healthy. And, it was called Little Miss Sunshine. I thought it was going to be another creepy movie, but it was not bad, or unless I missed something there. But it's about the little children's beauty for girls, particularly beauty pageants, right? Sort of the John Benet Ramsey. You know that whole story. I don't need to repeat it. But I see time and time again where parents are complicit in the pimping out of their children. And again, I don't know if it's the case of Natalie Portman. Her parents or parent are probably decent. Okay, I'm not even doubting that they're decent. But I've seen this in my world, in my professional world. I had a colleague who, in order to advance himself up the academic ranks, I don't even know if I should tell you this story, but I'm not going to mention his name. But he was a colleague of mine, and he had two children. All right. The one that was born as a boy is now a girl, identifies as a girl. And the one that was born as biologically as a female now identifies as a male. So, and his he comes from a background of his father being a psychiatrist, and comes from the so-called mental health industry. And without going into the details of his life, it lines up very closely with what I call the Alice complex, because it's not all about Alice, the victim itself. It's about the constellation of players who are behind the creation of these traumatized individuals, such as uh, Alice Liddell, as well as Alice, the literary figure or the film figure. And I used that particular still shot in uh, the design here, the curtain, the Alice in Wonderland, from, I guess that was a 2010 film. And yes, I did my due diligence and I watched it. And again, I was creeped out. That was a Disney production, of course, right? And man, I watched and I said, the whole subtext is about incest. It is about incest. The body language, the dialogue, the creepy expressions, the acting. Johnny Depp was in it. Guess what? Not that he's creepy. Okay. I'm not casting dispersions on any. You can make your own decision. I don't know why he looks like a skeleton today. I have no idea, or why for a period of time he was playing a pirate. He was obsessed with Keith Richards, and then in the later phase, he was obsessed with Dr. Gonzo, Hunter S. Thompson. He was in that movie too. But he was in this Disney production, another remake of Alice in Wonderland, with a huge pedophilic, mind-controlled subtext. And guess what role he played? I don't have, this is an easy one. The Mad Hatter. The Mad Hatter. Of course, he played the Mad Hatter. And then you had another monarch type Q, Manchurian Candidate, right? The Queen of Hearts, or was she the Queen of Spades? With what's his name, Lawrence Harvey, in the Manchurian Candidate, right? The incest book, right? That also has an incest. But the Queen of Hearts, guess who played that? Who was that one? Helena Bonham Carter. There you go, another one of them. Sort of cast-offs, or people who come from a semi-elite British background, and were put into the films to occupy a certain position within the Alice complex. Norman Smith says, "Yikes!" Yeah, I say yikes too. American Lady, She's La Rothschild. Is that Helena Bonham Carter? Yeah, that's good. Good call. See, look at this. I have such incredible. You don't need me. Why don't you just talk amongst yourselves? Yes, Johnny's creepy. He used to get arrested. And gosh, we haven't even talked about what's her name, his former girlfriend. Her name escapes me, but it'll come back. Anyway, I'm running out of time here, so let me kind of wrap up with the Alice complex. Um, The Hallis complex has to come to an end. We're not going to drain the swamp. We're not going to reclaim anything, let alone our American Republic, until the noir elements of American culture and society are, first of all, exposed and discussed. And it's not going to come out of academia because, as I told you, the university itself is a Gothic institution that is funded upon ephebophilia, founded and exists on those principles. It's going to have to come from us. It's going to come from developing new ways of looking at the world. I'm suggesting cryptozoology, or you can call it crypto history, crypto science, crypto archaeology. Well, how about crypto journalism? Yeah, I like that one. It's going to come from us. And I have great, yeah, Winona Ryder. Yes, thank you very much. That's another piece of work there that we can spend a whole hour with, but I won't, because most of you already know that story. But we have to come up with an incisive cultural, social, from a serious anthropological perspective about all these different currents that we're being hit with. And I think over the past 4 years, when Orange Man or President Trump was president, I think there was a huge, no, I don't think it, I know, I've seen it, I've heard it, it's really easy to observe. There's been a mass awakening of people so far as understanding where all these different currents are coming from and what they mean. So I don't want to insult people who are just now beginning to find out and discover this. I want you to learn. I want you to look at Robert Seffer and look at Sean Atwell's work and all the newbies, and look at Fantastic Polly, whoever. If that gets you into deeper, truly innovative first-person, boots on the ground research, like such as our friend George Webb is doing, then that's fine. But don't. And as so far as my research, because I hope this will also be a portal for you to follow me into the deeper recesses of our society and culture. And I'm doing this because I want to see the restoration of if it even existed, but at least an approximation, a close approximation for the city on the hill, right? The city on the hill, founded upon bedrock principles of natural law, not founded upon occultic, esoteric knowledge, higher sodomy, or initiatory type forms of knowledge that require you to sell your soul in exchange for access to what is already in our possession, which is our intelligence, our creativity, and our love of God, and our respect for our fellow human beings. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to end on that note. Please join us on the Thursday trio. It's going to be a whopper. It's been quite a week, an incredible week of research, discovery, and we are all going to share it together. So I'll see you in an hour. I'm going to have myself a cup of Assam black tea, ASAM, and I'll see you in a moment. Thank you very much for putting up with my boner, so to speak, for the first 19 minutes of not having any audio. But I'm glad I have it sound off, because I really went off on a number of people by name. All right, maybe another time. All right, bye. Thank you.